Hey, everybody, welcome back. This is the second episode in a series that Tim, Coach, and I are doing on sales funnels. Now, this episode and the next one are going to be specific to MSPs. Now, later on, we're going to do episodes, I guess it's three. I can't do math today. So this is 2 and 3 for MSPs. So 4 and 5, yes, I was right. I just, second guessed myself. 4 and 5 will be for vendors. So today, in this first session that we're talking to Tim about in terms of sales funnels for MSPs, we're going to be talking about working in your business versus working on your business, what that means. We're going to talk about what small MSPs should do for their top of funnel process. And then we're going to kind of end it with the point where we think MSPs really see the best conversion, and that is after they get that first meeting. Everything leads up to getting that first meeting, and then if you execute on that meeting well, you probably have a pretty good chance of getting the sale. So let me bring up Tim. Tim, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Excited to be on with you again and start this series because it's the whole point of the industry is to help. And I love that we're getting on, and that's what we're wanting to do here is to help the industry and specifically help, the MSPs, because that's where both of our passion lies.
Yeah. And we figured we'd help MSPs and vendors, but they're two separate topics because they're in two different places. So this session, like I said, is specific to MSPs. And the first thing we wanted to talk about when Tim and I were kind of going through this was working in your business versus working on your business. And of course, this comes from the Michael Gerber E-Myth series of books. And he kind of fathered that kind of idea of working on your business versus just working in your business. So Tim, why don't we start out with what the kind of difference is and what it means to you?
So for me, and I obviously we both see things differently because we both worked for MSPs and kind of gone through that entire funnel, right? Like I was really lucky. I didn't start out on the help desk, but I started out, really kind of being the director of ops or managing those help desk people and all that kind of stuff and worked up. But I think where you see this a lot are people, especially in the newer MSPs, are the owners or the founders that are really stuck in the day-to-day. Like they're still working tickets. They're still working projects, right? Like they're still heavily in the day-to-day. They may be their only salesperson, right? So they're so focused on growing their business from within the business that they don't have time to really be that strategic thinker. They don't have time to be that visionary that says, okay, where are we really going? Like, do I want to keep this path where I'm supporting anything and everything that comes at me because it's money in? Or do I want to really kind of get these silos that I'm really good at or that I'm interested in and start working that way? And in order to do that, you kind of have to have that out of body experience where you're just looking at your business objectively and saying, okay, how do I work on the business from a standpoint of making it grow? And a lot of times the only way you can do that is to pull yourself out of that day to day.
Yep. And that's the important part, right? And it's hard to do that sometimes because as people, we have personalities. We naturally like to do certain things. And for a lot of us in this business, we like the technical stuff. And because we like the technical stuff, we gravitate towards working tickets. Now, my experience was I started as a single, solopreneur and had to work my way up. Now, it's interesting that we're having this conversation today because it was just Tuesday. Yeah, it was Tuesday when I did a live stream with Jonathan Schofield from Channel Falcon. And we talked about the framework that I teach MSPs to do when it comes to working on their business versus working in their business and how to define what those different points are by using a customer journey. And to me, that makes sense. Other people, it might not. But what it allows you to do is say, I'm going to dedicate this plus calendar blocking, by the way, which is
Mhm.
another huge time hack for me. By saying, I want to spend this amount of time working on marketing, I want to work this amount of time on sales, and going ahead and blocking that out on your calendar allows you to switch those hats that you have to switch in order to work on the business rather than just in it. It's okay to work in it. You just can't do it all the time.
Right, and that's the thing is with it is you have to figure out what works best for you to focus, right? So like I'm all over the place. I work on this, I work on that, but I have to have dedicated time. Matter of fact, I went out and bought this little thing, which is just a timer that I hit, and essentially now watch that thing go off in 15 seconds. But it's just a timer that I hit that allows me focus time. But I can say,
Yep.
okay, here's what I want to focus on because, like, let's face it, when you are a single entrepreneur and you're trying to move in the direction of building your company, being your company, there are a lot of great techs out there that have the ability to do that. Now, a lot of times what they're missing is they're missing the business aspect, right? But because they're good at what they do, they're growing and they have to
Yeah.
figure out a way to strategically grow that path. And when you're early and you're by yourself and you're trying to make that, that's a perfect way to do. Block out a Tuesday morning, a couple hours here and there, and say, I'm going to strategically work on this to make my business better in the long run.
Yep. And, I was laughing before because I have that exact same timer. Now I have moved that one to the garage for when I'm working out. But I've replaced it. Basically, I have a Stream Deck, and if you're not familiar with what an Elgato Stream Deck is, it's basically a bunch of buttons that you can program that, you can actually design the icons that show up on the buttons and everything. But what I did was I created I'm looking at them now, a 5, 10, 15, 25, 45, and 50-minute button that I can just press so that it sets off a timer in that period of time, but it's right here at my computer. So, because a lot of times, even for simple situations like I knew this call was coming up and I was working on something that I could just heads down completely forget that we had this
Mhm.
recording session. But I hit that button so that in 10 minutes I would be reminded that I needed to switch gears. And so for a lot of us who have that focus kind of issue, especially when switching between tasks, a timer like that can be really helpful. Now, Tim, because we're talking about sales funnels, I think it's probably good to relate this to what does working on your business framed within sales funnels look like?
So that's a very I think that's an interesting conversation because we say framed within sales funnel, but immediately everybody's going to go to the first place I should go is to marketing. Marketing is not sales funnel. Sales funnel is not marketing. Marketing
Right.
certainly leads to awareness. It certainly leads to that long term play, but it's not an immediate. I think when you're talking about your short term sales funnel, one, as a small business owner or a single business owner, you got to really focus on referrals, right? You got to focus on, I've done a really great job at this company. I just need to have that conversation, schedule a meeting with the CEO saying, hey, and there's tricks of the trade, right? So you can go in and say, look, I've got 3 open slots this year, but they have to meet these parameters. Do you know anybody that would fit in those parameters? And start using your referral, your network, so to speak, to do that. I think it's also, the every city, every county has programs where they get the business owners together at least once a week, if not once a month. And it's dedicating the time to go to those so that people know who you are. Because if you don't have the money to pay for SEO and you don't have money to pay for the big, fantastic website to make sure you get hit on every search, and you don't have all this money, the strategic things about people finding out who you are and using those referrals are going to be key to the top of funnel.
And that's the great thing about those types of actions is they don't typically cost any money. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
maybe joining the chamber costs a little bit of money, but it's in the grand scheme of things, it's probably very small. But actually taking the time to do those things is important. And it's the type of actions that you can take that will drive, I would say, if we're kind of talking about marketing and sales, very highly qualified leads, right? There's a reason why referrals have, for the longest time, been kind of the king source of new revenue, of new clients for MSPs, because referrals work very well in this business. However, you need to be very intentional about how you work those referrals, how you get those referrals. Tim, you mentioned it. Pick your best clients, go out and meet with them. That is one of those actions that you can take to work on your business. The other thing you can do is you can actually try and scale that up a little bit and create a referral program where
Right.
you can send an email to all of your clients that says, hey, I'm willing to give you a $10 Starbucks gift card if you're willing to go out and get me a referral. And so there are different things that you can do, those actions that we're talking about, to work on your business. Another one that I want to mention, just because we're talking about referrals, is joint marketing. You may have like a voice over IP guy, like I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so he gave me his letter. I gave him my letter. We sent them out to each of our clients, and it worked out really well. It's another way to kind of feed off that referral type of business.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's the thing, is like when you build these relationships. So I had a circuit guy, right? For lack of a better term, we called them circuits back then, or voice or whatever. Back in the day when a T1 was lightning fast, right? And I had this guy like forever. And it meant I didn't have to deal with circuits, right? I just called him up and I gave him the address, and he would give me 3 options, and then we'd pick which one was best. But because him and I had such a great working relationship, and because I never tried to dig into his pocket, right? When he'd always be like, oh, let me give you 10% of the sell, or whatever it is. I don't want that, right? Like, I want you to handle the client when it comes to circuits once I call you, right? Then you develop that relationship, that it's a positive relationship for both of you, because you know this person, you've done business with them for a while, and it's like, I would love to refer you because you do X, Y, and Z that I don't do. So that's a perfect example of a referral, is people you're already friendly with. Now, I will tell you as well, once I got into larger MSPs and started managing and rebuilding those, I had a bunch of smaller guys on my list. And when I was talking to a client or a potential client, and they weren't quite large enough for what I needed them to be, then I referred them. So creating these relationships with other larger MSPs in town, trust me, they are getting clients all the time that they just can't service. It doesn't meet a minimum for them, or whatever the scenario is, right? But the ideal behind that is now you're being fed from a larger MSP, but that both ways, right? When you're that small person, that small business, and you're trying to run into it, and you find one of those companies, it's like, this is too much, or I can handle X, but I can't handle Y and Z, then the referral back to those larger companies will keep those smaller referrals, or the referrals that fit each partner, much better going down the road.
Yep, absolutely. And I think this, what we're talking about here is really relevant to the smaller MSP. And you've already described, we're not talking about the marketing side. We're not talking about trying to generate leads. We're talking about actually physically going out and getting business, in more of a sales motion, because we're talking about sales funnels. So what does it look like? What does the top of funnel look like, starting at the sales process, obviously, what does that look like for a smaller MSP?
For me, it has to do, well, it's obviously like, listen, I hate to say the name, but it's huge in any city you go into, right? The BNI groups, right? The Chamber of Commerce, the contacts you do business with. That's where you're really looking for your top of funnel. You're not going to get a lot from the internet. You're not going to get a lot from website and SEO progress, right? You're just not, and that's okay. So spending your time working on your business in those groups will help you work in your business as it starts in that sales process, to the point that you can actually bring in other entities outside to do that for you.
Yeah. To me, it's more about a targeted approach, whereas marketing is more casting a wide net, right?
Correct.
What you're doing when you're doing a sales motion top of funnel is you're going to the BNI groups, you're going to the chambers of commerce, you are looking through the phone book and finding people that look like your ideal client profile. And there's plenty of ways to find out what your ideal client profile is,
Well,
and we won't go
that's
through
where the
that.
Chamber of Commerce comes in, right? They
Yeah,
have profiles on all their people. And I think that's where you're getting to, is you have to be, when you're dedicating that kind of time, you have to be strategic in what you're doing versus just the wide cast of the net and hoping you're going to get something in.
right. And the thing that I'm trying to emphasize here is that you are looking for a particular type of client that matches the way you work and your culture, so that you have a greater chance of A, landing it, and B, being a good match for that client.
And I think the other thing too is you have to have some kind of established sales process. You have to have something you're following. It's a lot easier to say that when you don't need money, when you don't need clients, when you're strategically trying to grow your business. I talk about this quite a bit, and that's disqualifying as fast as you can. That is a strategic move. Why is that? Well, it's because if you disqualify someone, guess what? You're no longer wasting anybody's time, right? If you got one of those that come in and it is just difficult out of the gate, back out. Because if it's a difficult relationship to start off with, more than likely, unless you're much more mature and you know all the processes and the various ways to turn that around, up front, it's too much work. You're better off to go somewhere else, find someone else, and try to be more strategic about that. But disqualify early and, hold to your guns. I understand everybody needs to make payroll or everybody needs to make their house payment depending on what they're doing. But sales is a strategic process that you should be looking for, and qualifying those leads early up front is a better use of not only your time, but it's a better use of the potential client's time, and they'll appreciate that.
Yep. Now, there are some things that I think that every MSP should kind of have in their quiver, so to speak. They should have arrows in their quiver that they're making use of, tools maybe that are relevant to that sales funnel process. What are some of those tools in your mind that MSPs need to be using?
Oh, I think for me, it's having a documented process.
Mm-hmm.
It's having something that tracks it, right? So I'm an old ConnectWise guy, and the first MSP I worked for, he was an even older ConnectWise guy. And the saying back then is, if it's not in ConnectWise, then it didn't happen, right? So, and I still very much believe if the activity is not documented, then the activity didn't happen.
Exactly.
Right.
100% agree.
But, and sales is more relationships, right? So understanding, it's easy to put in there, hey, I had lunch, or I called, or I texted, or I did something. But having some kind of tool, and early on, it may start out as an Excel spreadsheet, right? Or a OneNote, or back in the day, we'd use Access. God forbid somebody use Access for a database nowadays. But we would use the basic tools to track, kind of a CRM type thing, to track activity. So I think that's the important thing as far as having that, and then having a dedicated process procedure about how you're moving them through. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to step in the middle of a mess because you missed 3.A and you didn't really focus on that when that's a critical part of your process. So I think tracking the activity and having a process around it is critically important in the quiver.
Yeah, I think that process is also the place where you have to start, because if you don't have the process, you don't know which tools you need. You don't know what templates you need. You don't know what email, things you need. And, I love the fact that you brought up using Excel as a CRM initially. You don't have to invest in a CRM when you're first starting. You can create a list in Excel and start from there. Now, do I think using a CRM is easier? And are there some pretty inexpensive ones out there that I think are pretty good? The one that I use currently for all things MSP is called Biggin. It's by Zoho. 15 bucks a month, I think. And
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, if you just spend a little bit of time investing, listen, you're not going to jump to the big dogs right off the bat. You're not going to jump to all these super in-depth, like I did a demo here a while back. I think I was in, maybe I don't know which show I was at, but I demoed Halo, right? And I was really impressed by first touch to ticket,
mm-hmm.
right? And I don't know what the price of Halo is, but my point is you don't necessarily have to jump to a Halo or a HubSpot or a Kaseya this or one of an Atera or one of the many other ones that are out there. You don't have to do it. There are certainly ways to go about it if you just take the time to work and ask your network, right? What are you guys using when you start out so that I'm not going through, $1,000 a month on just my tools?
Yeah.
When 500 of that is my food.
Yeah. Start generating revenue first. Use what you got in your Microsoft Office 365 platform until you get to the point where those tools make sense.
Right. Because I mean, I have the consulting company, Third Power, and I went out and I've just bought literally I like desktop apps. It's just me. I know I'm old. Everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, he didn't work in the cloud." No, I like work. I spend a lot of time on a plane. The cloud isn't always available, but there is so much I can do with that lowest level of that 365 license that comes with the desktop apps for me that I don't need to invest in a whole bunch all over the place. And I think that's critical to make sure that you're starting out, you're not putting yourself in a hole right off the bat with your tools you're using.
Exactly. And I mean, to be frank, I mean, I only chose to use a CRM for all things MSP because it gave me some automation that I was able to build in for scheduling podcasts and scheduling live streams and stuff like that with my guests that allows me to not have to do some of that manual work. So
yeah, and there's you and one other one I will say out of the gate that do such a great job, right? And neither one of you are these large, massive entities with tens of thousands of dollars going to tools every month. But the way that both of you handle your activity when it comes to your interaction with people is like the big boys could learn something from you guys.
Well, I think that's because I'm pretty sure I know who you're talking about. And it's because we're both intentionally small when it comes to that. So, but we've also both kind of done bigger things. So we know how it should work in that bigger environment. And we've just brought those lessons to what we're doing now.
Well, and you've done it, and this is where the working on and not in is at,
Yes.
right? Like you're using experience, you're using people you know. Like I know as well, right? When we're at events together, we walk around and we're like, "Hey, what mic are you using?
Yep.
Hey, what streaming platform are you?" Same thing here. Hey, what you go to your local chamber. Hey, what other groups are you in that you're seeing value at? Right? Is there any meetups that you know at where, on Friday nights, there's a group getting together at a local pub or at a restaurant or they're just a meetup, using those resources at these events is that's intentionally working on your business because you're trying to create those connections that will lead to that top of funnel.
Yep.
And that's not saying you're going into a BNI or a chamber of commerce and you're trying to sell everyone there. That is not it. Selling is about relationships. I'm telling you now, right now, when I was an MSP, if I got those phone calls every Tuesday at 11 a.m., I knew who it was. And eventually I just wrote it into the software that it just dumped them into it dumped them into a voicemail that went nowhere is what it did. Right?
Yep.
Selling is about relationships. It's about building relationships. So don't go into the chamber. Don't go into BNI and these things and hard sell all of them. This is a more strategic play. You're building those relationships. You want to be able to come up, in 3 months or 6 months time and say, hey, Eric, I got this client I think you do really good at. Would you want to do a trade of maybe some list or something like that where each other would fit? But those relationships in those groups is what's going to lead to your top of funnel, not the group itself.
Yep. And this kind of just clicked for me. The relationship is important because if you don't know them well enough, you can't disqualify them fast enough.
Well, I will tell you right now, hands down, the best, and I'll call him out by name. The best sales relationship I have ever had on any level from a vendor to me as an MSP was a guy named Greg Flynn at Datto. And the reason why Greg was such a great relationship for me is we rarely talked about business.
Mm-hmm.
When I needed some business stuff, I would call him, or when Datto had something coming out, right? If you remember those old, I love those surge protectors they came out with that was online that you can control on and off and all those.
Oh, yeah.
He knew me and he knew my business well enough that he would only send me the stuff that made sense. He would only have conversations. And I will tell you that Greg and I probably spoke pretty often, or we texted fairly often. And so I knew when he was coming to me with something legitimate to help my business and not something that was just the hard sell or the upsell. I still, if it's a kid's birthday, I got a text. If it's my birthday, I got a text, right? Like holidays, like that's just the relationship that you build. And that's where the true sales is going to come from. And I think I heard it the other day. People buy from people they like and they have relationships with.
Yep.
If you're a hard sell person, and you and I both seen on the booth, we know the people that are hard sell and their booths tend to go pretty low in attendance come the following days of the first night because everyone's like, I don't want that. They try to drift by them. So the hard sell is not where it's at.
Nope. Now, we've talked about kind of the top of the MSP funnel and going out and finding the right targets and what you should do to get referrals and having the right tools to reach out and those kinds of things. But when it comes to actually getting the meetings, what are some of your, best tips and tricks for both getting and maybe running a meeting?
So I would put this in a couple of different categories. So one, think about time. That's the commodity that none of us can get any more of. It don't matter how much money you got, you're not getting any more of that. So think about how you effectively use time to your advantage. So like I'll tell you now, when I'm at the booth, I don't sell a demo. Right? The word may come up, maybe a conversation, but what I'm trying to move to is a initial call. Now, we both know in industry statistics tell us that you have to have 7 touches in there, right? And that can be an email, it can be a webinar, it can be whatever it is, but you got to have 7 touches. What I try to connect with somebody, it's usually for a 30-minute meeting. Hey, I just want to know more about you. And I want you to know a little bit about me. So then we can decide if that next step makes sense. Going in for a hard demo, going in for an hour and a half to press, and 15, 20 minutes in, you both know it's not going to work, but you got another hour you got to deal with is not a big deal. So I think that cup of coffee meeting, right? Let's just have a 30-minute conversation. I think that's a critical aspect of learning about each other. And then from at the end of that, you can determine. And I think the other thing is, once again, drive to the know. Ask them what their story is. Why are they having this conversation with you? One of the things that the books, the particular sales that I like, it's reversing, right? You got to reverse the question 3 times to get a true answer, right? So somebody may be telling you they need this like $50,000 system or $100,000 system, and you're all happy because you're oh, here's a big sell for me. But if you go into it, the reality of it is they may just be trying to get to a kid's ball game, and a $50 widget will fix that pain for them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, you may have not had that big sell, but what you did is you just established a trusting relationship with them. You established that, hey, I'm not just going to sell you anything that I can sell you. I'm actually here to listen to you and help you solve the root problem, right? It's years ago, I walked into a company that was having a massive problem. And we went in there and right off the bat, and the other company that we were kind of competing against was in the room with us. And it was fine because it was kind of this brainstorming session, but they way oversold hardware, services, the whole 9 yards. And in the end, we get to it and we're sitting there talking, and my guy's like, well, you got a layer 2 issue. And if we just do this, which is about an hour and a half, it'll steady out. You'll fix it. And then the person on the other side of the table was like, no, layer 3 is better. Okay, why is layer 3 better? Because it's layer 3. Doesn't mean it's better, right? It just means that if you overcomplicate the resolution, then you're really causing your process down the road. So go in, be trustworthy. Try to get them to that no in the contract. Because what happens is if you're constantly driving to the no, if you're constantly driving to get them to say no, by the time you're ready for signature, you've negated all the objections.
Yep.
And you've built the trust along the way because you said, well, I don't know if that's the right way to do it. You're actually being a partner to them and not just a salesperson.
And you're getting to the root problem. And it's interesting because this has come up twice in the past 2 days about, how basically that's the Toyota method, right? That's how Toyota got to the processes of fixing problems that they got to, is because the guy who founded Toyota had this thing where whenever there was a problem, they would ask why 5 times to get to the root of the problem so they could actually solve the root problem rather than just the symptoms of the problem. And it's very similar to what you're talking about here, just in a sales process rather than a manufacturing process.
And you would be amazed which way. I was telling this story earlier today. It's kind of funny that we're talking about this. Is years ago, I was working for a client and they brought us in to do this thing. And by the time it was all said and done, this was like $1 million project, right? It was massive. And like they're telling me what they want to do, and we're looking, and we've spent months going through this. And I look at them at one point, and like networking people know coding people's tricks and vice versa, right? There's that whole network,
Yep.
Coder kind of mentality. But the one thing I can tell you is if you require a crap ton, which is just less than a metric crap ton of resources in a server, the code's not good. I don't care who you are. The code is sloppy. If I got to have 325 gigs of RAM to run something that shouldn't take that much, right? It's just how it is. So in the process of this conversation, we started getting into the why are you trying to do this? Well, it turns out that they had, and this was a large company, obviously, it turns out that they had a key human in their process that was looking at retirement. Like he had gone through the entire process. And before he retired, they needed to fix everything that he does. And the tribal knowledge was leaving. And he was planning on leave, I'm not consulting, I'm out. Right. So it ended up is it took the $1 million to fix the human issue. Also because they haven't done a ton of upgrades over a decade or so. But getting to that why will lead you to understand exactly where the sales process is going. If a client comes to you and says, I need a new server, your first question should be why, because they shouldn't know they need a new server.
So taking this back to the meetings, first meeting, coffee, right? It's that cup of coffee meeting you referred to. Second meeting, for an MSP, probably not going to be a demo. For a vendor, it would probably be a demo. But for an MSP, I would think it's probably more of a discovery type of conversation, a deeper dive into the existing environment to get to the point where you can actually create a proposal. And then meeting number 3 would be the presentation of that proposal.
Right. So, okay. So let's hit on both those. So like you're already stirring the pot, and you're going to cause some naysayers to be commenting, and that's fine. Let them comment. So you're saying a discovery. In the old days, we called it an assessment. I 1,000% believe that should be free within reason. And the reason why I say that is because you got to know what kind of rat's nest you're stepping into. Right? A lot of people will say, well, if they're willing to spend $1,000 or $500 on the assessment, then, they're showing their true intent. I think it's a money grab, right? If you have a way to go and do an assessment, run a tool, look at their closet, see how many Post-it notes with passwords are up in their office for those that still have brick and mortar, right? Take a walk around. That can provide you a wealth of information that allows you to go into that next meeting much better prepared, and probably allow that business owner, because you're probably talking to the CEO or at least the CEO's primary influencer when it comes to tech, about probably some situations they weren't even aware of. And then I will say on the second part of that, when you say schedule the presentation, now I know we do a lot of stuff remote. If you have you don't even have to say if you have the ability. There should not be a presentation without an actual presentation, right? The contents of that presentation are just as important as the document you sent over. Because we all know the first thing that you do if somebody sends you a proposal is flip to that back sheet or tab over and look at the price. That price may be extremely cost effective, but it's one of those conversations too where I would add this. Get the word expensive out of your head if you're a salesperson. Remove it. You know what's expensive to you, but you don't know what's expensive to them.
Yep.
So you going in saying, here's this thing where I got to create X, Y, and Z, and it's going to cost me $50,000, or it's going to cost them $50,000 to do this. I think that's expensive. They may be spending $50,000 on toilet paper worldwide. You don't know. You don't know what's expensive to them. Now, there's definitely the whole conversation about the Yugo, the Buick, and the Cadillac, and doing some options, and here's what each gets you kind of a thing. But stop thinking you know what's expensive, because you don't.
Right. All right. Well, we've covered some great stuff today. We've started with, why and how to work on your business rather than just in your business. We've talked about the sales funnel, specifically sales, not marketing, and some of the things, some of the tools, some of the actions you can take there. And then we just talked about meetings. And, I think that those are really actionable items for these MSPs. And Tim, I'm really excited to see what we're going to be talking about next time when we take it one step further and talk about hiring your first salesperson and creating the right sales compensation plan for them.
Absolutely. Those will be good conversation. I'm sure very well debated.
It's going to be fun. All right. So look for that video coming up soon, and we'll see you in the next one.